if you have a set of parents and your name is not on their checking account or their checks, you will not be able to get into their account upon death.
But ultimately, we've got to protect the rights of an individual and the choices that they make.
And it's not an easy thing to go through.
No.
I think it's one of the hardest things, as a son or a daughter that you have to do with your parents. Christopher, we've seen it time and time again to where it sometimes can just rip families apart.
Sure did. Exactly right. To go get some ice cream.
Yeah. And it's so exciting to be a part of.
Amazing.
It really is. It's one of the biggest things I think we've learned.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for being here. It is a gorgeous day outside the studio. Before we get started, we like to remind everybody to make sure you check out all of our channels. If you like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple or Spotify, and check us out on Facebook and Instagram, that would mean a lot to us. You would get notified anytime a new episode drops and get to see some behind-the-scenes footage happening right here around the table. But without further ado, grab your favorite chair and pull up a seat right here on Around the Table with Vickie. I'm your co-host, Chris Runk, and across from me, as always, is my mother, your host. This is her table, Vickie Runk.
Hello, everybody. It is a beautiful day here in Virginia, and I had the idea that we should do a pretty important discussion today with our favorite lawyer, and he's also a co-host. Well, no, he's the host, and his wife Julie is a co-host with Law Dog, which is his show on WLNI. So you come on 30 minutes earlier than we do, right, Rich?
Yeah, and that's why your numbers are so low.
I
It's
know,
because
I
people
know.
tune me out and forget to check or get back on.
I was wondering why that was happening. Now I know.
But Mom's right.
Yeah.
He's a great friend of ours. He is a lawyer at Day Law Group. And like she mentioned, he's no stranger to the radio waves, has his own show called the Law Dog Radio at 11 o'clock on WLNI. Welcome to the show, Richard Gilman.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So every day, Rich, with what I do, I get so many phone calls from people, friends, church members, different organizations that are looking for advice on elder law and all that goes into aging. And I know that you've been in the business previously, so you have a little deeper understanding of, the geriatric population and how we need to wrap them up and protect them when it comes to law. So tell us a little bit about you and what you've done so we can just set the table today
Sure.
for the show.
I've spent most of my career within health services as well as human services. I had a very large company. I had 500 employees at the time that I sold it, in which we took care of people, adults, all the way up. I think our oldest was in their 80s or 90s, but they typically had intellectual disabilities, which used to be called mental retardation, and then mental health issues. I had offices across the state. I made every single possible mistake as a business person, but you do that as a business person, as you know. So when I went into practicing law as a second or third career, which was about a decade ago, it just naturally went into working with people that have disabilities, folks that are a little bit older, and so that's what has carried on from that.
So when we start this discussion with one another today, I think one of the biggest questions that I get almost daily is, how do I get mom to do what I need her to do? And they're talking about in a legal standpoint. How do I have any jurisdiction over her to make her want to go to a home where it's safer, or control her money to where it's a little bit more sound with her not getting in it all the time? Because they do start to lose some of their faculties, and choices are just not being made that are good for that particular resident. What would you advise a family to do that's listening today that's in that particular situation?
Unfortunately, if mom or dad have their mental faculties, are able to make decisions, those decisions may be poor, but we've got to take those into consideration. You can cajole, twist arms. If it's a dangerous situation, then we can get potentially the state involved through Adult Protective Services and other various types of functions. But ultimately, we've got to protect the rights of an individual and the choices that they make. So that's always very difficult in from a legal point of view. When I have families in there, it's very hard because they think that if I have a power of attorney or if I have this document that I'm going to be able to make all the decisions, and that's just unfortunately not the way that we in the United States want to do it.
Mhm.
I mean, and I usually ask families, do you want someone else making your decision for you?
Mhm.
And there are situations that mom and dad are making decisions that are very, very different than what we would want for them. That it could be potentially a health and safety issue, but ultimately they have say unless there is a competency issue. And if someone is uh, deemed incompetent, then that changes things. And at that point, someone can step in and in effect become the decision maker.
Mhm. So, what I always suggest to families is number one, go to your family doctor and have a cognitive test done to get a baseline on really what what the physical and cognitive impairments could be, and it could just be beginning, and you at least have a baseline to go by, so that if you have to do subsequent visits to a doctor, you have something to start at. So many seniors just dive right into memory loss, and they've never even been to the doctor
Mhm.
to determine when it started or if it started. So I would encourage all of our listeners today that are potentially getting ready to start stepping into taking care of mom or dad or both, because sometimes it's both that comes on your lap, to take them to the medical doctor. And then the medical doctor will decide whether you need to go see a geriatric psychiatrist, whether further testing is needed as far as brain scans or CAT scans or MRIs to determine where are they in their memory loss journey and what sorts of medications can be given. And then if there's a chance that mom or dad may not be able to drive anymore, there's legal route that you can take with that as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. And your advice is absolutely spot on because it does when you start getting the medical professionals involved, then it gives you grounds where if you have to move forward legally, driving, decision making, healthcare, those sort of things, there are some steps that we can put in place as that the law allows us to do. But to be honest, the first step is to get the opinions of medical personnel and say, yeah, mom and dad aren't able to make their own decisions there, and a lot of factors go into that, health and safety issues, their health, um, and again, are they, vulnerable for being taken advantage of? So there and a number of other issues that you do have to take in consideration.
And it's not an easy thing to go through.
No,
It's
no.
I think it's one of the hardest things, as a son or a daughter that you have to do with your parents. Christopher, we've seen it time and time again to where it sometimes can just rip families apart because one side of the family may want this and the other side of the family may want that. And then we talk about split families that are coming and blending, and one may know dad more than they know mom. And mom may be getting the better part of the deal, and they don't agree with what we're doing with dad. So it does really take a lot of commitment on a family's part to do what's best and put all their troubles aside of not getting along or whatever. And we see that a lot in today's time as well.
Yeah, it doesn't always happen very smoothly.
No.
Rich, on that topic, do you have any suggestions of how a POA can go about having those conversations without causing a family blow up or leaving scarring there?
Yes. First of all, if it's never been done, you should sit down with a lawyer or someone who is going to help you start doing estate planning. And this is most of us don't ever think we're going to die, but we ultimately I don't know of anyone who will avoid that. So, if you have put those things together, any life changes, you're moving, your children are now adults, it should always be a point where you pull those documents out and review them. But in a typical estate planning type situation, you're going to look at who's going to be making decisions or who would you like making decisions if you're not capable of making those decisions. If we put that in place, that's already resolved. So if you have division, for example, a blended family where stepmom is family, the children may think she's evil, whatever it is.
Mhm.
If we put that in place, that's a lot harder because we're taking what your decision is and putting it in place before it's needed. You're also looking for advanced medical directives, which you guys deal with. This is a medical power of attorney that only goes into effect when there's an incompetency determined by a couple doctors or a doctor and a psychologist. And at that point, that person, that medical power of attorney, is going to be making the medical decisions for those. So those are the two documents that you are primarily concerned about as far as while you're alive. Now, most people are concerned about what happens after I pass away, and that's where wills and trusts and all that comes into play. And I will tell you, one of the reasons why I do the estate planning with my clients is because it gives what it does is when if you do it properly, when you do pass away, it makes it so much easier for family to because there you have instructions on exactly what's going to happen, and even if there's a challenge or someone's feels like they've been slighted, it's there and it shows what you wanted for your things and for the loved ones you leave
It's a
behind.
guidebook to aging is what it
Yeah,
is, and I just read a stat that only 36% of Americans have advanced directives, and that's pretty staggering considering that we're all aging and we're all gonna be faced with this,
right.
and, I know lots of times a family will come to us and, we have to ask them, "Are do you want resuscitation done?" Or
Mhm.
and that just blows their mind, and it almost there's sometimes they're offended by it. And we have in our charts a DNR, do not resuscitate, or a full code. And it's best to know the answers to that well before they get placed in any kind of hospital setting or assisted living or nursing home, memory care kind of setting, because then there's just no questions. And then when you get in the middle of an emergency, there's no feelings hurt because we decided that long before that decision had to be made. If it's made at last minute, you can really start to doubt yourself, don't you think?
You can. There is under Virginia law a pecking order, as in most states, of if you don't have an advanced medical directive, who usually they look to your spouse first, then your children, grandchildren, and then they move up to parents and down to aunts, uncles, that sort of thing. I If you're fine with your spouse making a decision, or if, again, in a blended family where there may be some contention there, it's always a good thing to put that in place. Or if you have a situation, I have families that come in and say, "Look, my 3 children, they love me and all this, but Susan, my daughter, is not gonna handle this very well, so I would much rather Bob, my
Mhm,
son, doing it." And that's very
mhm.
appropriate for an advanced medical directive. There are people that don't necessarily need them, but again, you do go into every doctor visit that you make, you have an
They
advanced
yep,
medical directive.
mhm.
So, that it's a document that really makes sure that your wishes are being followed if you are unable to make your own decisions at that
Mhm.
point.
I was actually asked that this week. I was like, I need to get on that. You mentioned blended families and
Mhm.
how there can be some tension. What do you see are the most common pitfalls?
There's a joke that I tell. It's a really not a great joke, but the two things that keep lawyers in business are fence lines and wills. And so
I'll laugh at it.
yeah, thank you, I appreciate it. So I'm not known for my humor, but what you do have is you again, even in a normal family. Um, there is always an outlying child that has maybe has some problems that with drugs, alcohol, money. These are things that can create havoc during your lifetime as well as afterwards. You've got again when you have step parents and you have brothers and sisters from mom and dad that are different. That again, there's a lot of things that are kind of can create throw wrenches into the works. So ultimately, every family is very different, but it's actually sitting down and thinking through it, and that's where a lawyer is very effective because not only are we working with what's happening after your death or if you become incompetent, but we're also giving you the opportunity to, and should ask you questions on how does this work and how do you want everything to work when you're not able to make your own decisions?
Right. And speaking of that, part of that is how are you going to be cared for when
Mhm.
you do need care? And in Virginia alone, we've done some cost analysis for benchmarks for our listeners today. And assisted living, an average cost of $78,000 a year. Nursing home in a semi-private is
Mhm.
$104,000 a year. Nursing home for a private room is $117,000 a year. So, getting these decisions made sooner than later, prepping your financial side as well as your physical side, the limitations that you may have to incur during this time is very important because there will be someone that has to be faced with making the decision. Does mom and dad have the money to do this, and how are we going to pull from it? So, talking about that, talk to us a little bit about will versus trust.
Well, I will give it one statistic. It is interesting. Not every more people, I think, and you'll be able to answer this, will probably wind up in an ALF,
Mhm.
assisted living. Nursing home or nursing care, only about 17-18% of us, and I don't know how old this statistic is, but will need long-term care. But that's enough where you need to really plan that. So one of the things we do is we work through that. But a will is very rigid in the way that you administer. It basically says this is the person who's going to handle my estate when I'm gone, and here is how everything is going to be handled and where everything goes. It's a will is nothing more than giving away your things as gifts. They're called testamentary gifts. So there's no right or wrong. Um, so, but it is very rigid in how you set that up. So a trust, unlike a will, has a tremendous amount of flexibility in how you set it up. If you've got, say, a child or a spouse who's disabled that's receiving Medicare, that could be affected, we can actually protect those interests to make sure that those benefits aren't affected in a trust. If you have it avoids probate, which is in Virginia a year-long process, kind of painful and something that should be avoided. But you can dictate, for example, if you have small children, you can dictate that they get a stipend during their college days or during their lifetime. If it's a very large estate, you can actually give it out over time, or you can just basically say, upon my death, this is where everything goes, and you don't have to go through probate, perhaps. There are other things that we can kind of look at when we're sitting down. For example, and I don't want to get down into the weeds, but transfer on death beneficiaries under bank accounts and investments that avoid probate altogether, and it makes it very, very easy for heirs to get those. It's within 30 to 60 days of mom or dad passing away, it's
On
resolved.
that topic, I would really love for our listeners to know this because I've found that it's so simple, but it is so important. If you have a set of parents and your name is not on their checking account or their checks, you will not be able to get into their account upon death. And so now is the time to go to mom and dad and say, I don't really care about your money. I'm not after your money, but please add me or your sister or your brother. Get one of you added to that account because I have been involved in this business long enough to know that is the number one issue whenever, death happens is they can't get in to pay any of their bills, and that's why you're talking about you avoid probate with a
R
trust.
Right, and joint, ownership, and that's what you're doing. There's 2 types of ways that people can sign checks. One is a signatory, which does not give you ownership
Mhm.
of a trust or of a bank account. But, for example, Chris and I give him, joint ownership of my account. If I die, because he's a joint owner, you get that account, and that's something maybe there's ways of working around that, but it does give you your heir who you trust, and that's a key part of this, the ability to have that money to pay for funeral expenses and pay for expenses. A transfer on death beneficiary is a form that you get from the bank or from an investment that immediately it says upon my death it goes to Chris. And if Chris is not there, then it goes to this other person. So, and the way it works is that we take our last breath, and then that bank account, if there is a transfer on death beneficiary, then it under the law becomes theirs. Then they have to show up with a death certificate and say, "Here, banker, this is mom passed away. Here's this," and he'll ask you, "Okay, do you want this write a check, or do you want to roll it over into another account?" So there's a number of really cool ways of handling estate planning that again protects your heirs, make sure everything's resolved, and just makes it so much easier when you
Yeah.
pass.
Just a life plan that we're going to
Right.
need. It just doesn't stop with being born. You have to prepare to die too. And there's so many people that want to run from that, but then that makes you powerless at the time that it happens because knowledge is power. And so that's why I wanted to do the show today, Christopher, because I get these questions all the time and people have this fabricated way of thinking in their mind that, oh, well, they're my parents. Well, legally, that's not gonna get us anywhere. We need to take the steps that you've talked about here on the show today.
Well, even spouses, for example, if you're married and God forbid, but your wife become or your husband becomes disabled, unable to make decisions. If there's no power of attorney, and he or she has bank accounts separate, there is nothing you can do. So having a power of attorney in place protects your interests, so that if something were to happen, and you can no longer make decisions, then your spouse can do that. But just because you're married, if you have separate assets such as bank accounts, investments, and all of that, you can't get into them unless you have permission to.
Yeah, no, we have 6.9 million people right now living with Alzheimer's.
Yes.
And so the idea of planning well before you have memory impairment is just absolutely essential these days. It's not going away. Those numbers keep growing. And talking about that, getting back to a lot of questions that I get is mom's at home. I can't get her to listen that she's got memory issues. And the other thing I'd like to place in everybody's ears today is that we do have an adult protective service agency.
Yes.
It originates at the state level, and then we have all the localities and municipalities that they serve. So we have a certain amount of people that can go into the home and do a wellness check. If you're just not sure, maybe you don't live where mom lives anymore. You're across the country and she's not answering the phone the way she should, and you've been able to tell that there's been some strange behaviors. If you just need a wellness check, APS will go out and do that. We also have the ombudsman system that will advocate on behalf of the resident and the family. And if there needs to be a placement made, there's lots of times that we use that ombudsman during the time that they're bringing them from home to a facility. So we can have a whole community of geriatric specialists that do this every day, that see, conditions. They'll check the refrigerator to make sure there's food in there. They have a whole list of questions that they ask to determine whether that person is at risk. And ultimately, you as a lawyer and me as a provider, we don't want to see any of our seniors suffering in the
No.
community. And I said this before on the show, but I'll say it again. It's not always wise to leave I left them there as long as I could. And, families will brag, oh, I left her there till she was
Right.
89. But what kind of quality of life did they have, and were their needs really being met? And so bringing all of that to the forefront of people's minds to just think about aging different. Number one, we need to be legally secured in the path that we're taking, where we pillow our head at night and we have no questions about what we're going to do with mom and dad. And then we need to be empowered that if we do have fears or anxiety about how they're living at home, or it's questionable whether they should be driving or not,
Right.
and all of those great things, to include the doctor, potentially a geriatric psychiatrist, and then include ombudsman services and adult protective services. And then you head on around the corner to what we do, which is assisted living. And lots of times I'll tell a family, blame it all on the doctor. Don't take responsibility or yourself. Now, mom, the doctor wants us to try this for 30 days. And most of the time, when we get them in and get them good and settled, they either don't remember that they've come from home, or they're so ingrained with what all we've got going on, they'll say, well, I think I'll try it another 30 days because they
Yeah.
want to save
Yeah.
face that they really don't like it, but maybe they do.
Well, and to that point, again, if you do the planning up front and well before, and estate planning is not for 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, it's for your age as well.
Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is, you hear estate planning and you think it's going to happen later in life,
Right.
right? What age should somebody start thinking about their estate and how to plan it and plan? Because we've started that process a little bit, and
Mhm.
it provides so much clarity to my brother,
Well,
my
and it's an
sister.
emotional process too. We really have not enjoyed going through that process, but it's necessary. It is emotional because you're realizing that you are inevitably one day not going to be on this earth, and sometimes that's a little hard to accept. Like you said, I've never met anybody that escaped it either, so it's going to happen, and the likelihood of being prepared is going to fall in your hands.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at, you're starting to make an income, you're working, you have children, you have a wife, those are the times that you sit down or should start developing a relationship with a lawyer. Not that you hopefully will ever need him or her, but but for example, not everyone needs a will in Virginia. So, uh, uh, I mean, for example, if you are a single um, uh, young adult and something happens to you, you have no dependents, you don't have a wife, everything is going to go to your parents. Now, if you don't want that to happen, yeah, that's time to sit down with a lawyer. But things resolve themselves, but you may lose control of how they resolve. But getting back to planning, again, with long-term care planning, especially as far as providers, doing things up front, you have a whole lot more options. You get to go around, for example, Runk and Pratt,
Mhm.
you can go and you can look at other providers and see what's going to be right for mom and dad or for
Right,
you.
right.
And what we typically get is people push things off. Something happens
Mhm.
that changes the equation of where you're living at that point, and now it becomes, "We
Emergency.
gotta go. We've
Mhm.
gotta figure out," and your options are so much narrow
Mhm.
at that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well,
I like to ask a quick, both as industry leaders. Let's just say, because Mom, I know how quickly this happens in our field, where somebody comes to you and they need help. What are some quick steps that they can take in the next 30 days, should problems arise, care wise and legally, to start the process?
I think
Because
number
so
one.
many folks just don't know where to start.
Yeah, number one, you better have yourself a good lawyer. Start looking for that now. Day-Law Group, I strongly
Thank you.
suggest.
There we
Appreciate it.
go.
But there's other great lawyers out there, like Rich mentioned, that
There
can
are.
take care of this. Now, not all lawyers handle this, so make sure it is somebody that really specializes in this. Number two, do your homework. Find out if mom should need assisted living, like Rich said. Go to the different ones, see the difference. By the time you walk in and walk out, you're going to know whether that's the place for mom. She would be great at choosing it herself. Make it like a field trip. We're going to go to lunch afterwards. And mom, I want you to choose where you want to be. And we're just going to mark this down for later down the road. And if you can offer a lunch or a shopping trip, she'll go every time.
Well, and that's the thing. I think I would, uh, m- if Julie said to me, "Hey, let's go look at the different assisted living facilities," I would go, "No, no." And if you, again, the way that you approach that is say, "Look, we don't need it today,
Hmm.
but let's go out and see what's available." I think most people are amenable to that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rich, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for just a fantastic
Well, thank
conversation
you.
today. I imagine we'll definitely continue this on
Yes.
dear down the road, and
Yes,
as
there's so much more we can talk about to help our listeners, and that's what this show is all about, is to get you the information that you need to properly age and be empowered by it.
well, Mom, as always, I know you like to end each show with a quote, so the floor is yours.
Well, today I chose one that is kind of very relative to this show, so here we go. Each season in our lives serves a purpose. Be thankful for every chapter, the people who carried you through, and the times you found happiness when you least expected it. We can't always understand the reasoning behind our circumstances, but we have to trust there is always a purpose. Folks, thanks for joining us here today. Write into VickieTalk.com if you have more questions for the Law Dog. Look him up and listen to his show on WLNI every Saturday at 11, and then we follow right behind him at 11:30. Until next week, I'm Vickie, and we are right here around the table.